Matt, are you recording now?
Yes.
Okay, so let's start. So welcome everybody to the Apache OpenWhisk Technical Interchange call on 5th February. And today's topics are as follows. So let's have a time to introduce a new attendee. Cynthia, do you want to introduce yourself? Alex, maybe you attended the meeting before, right? Okay, let's move on. So I summarized a couple of PRs within recent 2 weeks. And the first one is to update the Ubuntu 14 to 18 in instructions. And the second one is to enable the CPU resource scaling based on action memory for Kubernetes Container Factory. And the next one is just kind of performance optimization for Cosmos DB. And next one is to leave some logs when pod launch fails. And next one is to improve the standalone launch script. And next one is relevant to Kafka. So this is to check the privileges of each component before creating Kafka topic. And the last one is to add Swift 5.1 kind to the runtimes JSON. JSON, yes. And these are today's topics. Do we have any other things to bring up? Okay. Michele, do you want to share first?
Yeah, I am trying to share my screen. 1 second. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, good.
Yes.
No, because share screen. Okay, share. Okay, good. And then I have to share desktop too. Here is it. Okay. Yeah. Can you see the screen? Good. Okay. Can you see the title slide? Because you guys, can you see the title slide? Because usually I have problem with it. Can you see
yes,
it? Okay, good.
Yes,
So I can start. So I am discussing now the attempt, because at the moment it's a work in progress, to build another debugger, because I think this is the third one that has been developed. This one is a bit different because it has an IDE, so it tries to be a complete, ready to go, integrated environment. Actually, the idea was actually to use the IDE. The debugger was something that I thought while working on it, so I could also add the debugger. And actually, I tried to use the existing ones that I had some problems. So I tried to explain where I am. So my goal is basically to have this integrated local development, so to be able to deploy and develop OpenWhisk application with a complete environment. And the idea was to use the TIA, that is a very nice project that is basically the same as VS Code, but running in a browser. So all you need is to launch a Docker image, and you you have a complete environment. So the idea was to put everything needed in one image of TIA. TIA can also do the debugging. So the idea I have is that we can have maybe extending the Whisk command line of a subcommand IDE that only requires Docker and will create a start locally, a complete development environment with using the standalone OpenWhisk to test and run the actions, and the web-based editor TIA. And also in the process, also I added the debug support that at the moment is developed by myself, but if possible, I can also integrate the Adobe the Adobe Whisk debug, because at the moment the work I have done is only for the actual loop-based runtimes, and probably the Whisk debug is already working for the others that they're not based on actual loop. Although probably I can reuse it if I understand how. This is still an open question. But in any case, I have for now proof of, let's say, proof of concept, a bit more than a proof of concept working. So the idea to enable debugging was because Action Loop Proxy launches a process, and it was easy just to put the process in debug mode. And I had the idea while I was developing the TypeScript runtime. So once I had this, running under the debugger, I built an image based on TIA that will connect to that. And then I packaged everything. I packaged the standard OpenWhisk as a Docker image, and then I connected the two. So this is the situation where I am now. I use the video because it's a bit. I don't want to risk to have problems while I do the demonstration. So so this one is the video I recorded a week ago. This one is actually showing the idea using just a makefile. So first I start the standalone OpenWhisk, as you can see in the video. Then I start the IDE based on here. Now it's starting. Okay, it's also building because it's development mode. Now I have running the standalone OpenWhisk and TIA. I can now access to with the browser. And here I have the editor with an action. Now I deploy it. There's a script that deploy it, and while I deploy, I also initialize the debugger. And then the image returns the configuration that I need to connect to the debugger, as you can see here. Now I have to add a configuration file. That is basically returned by the action itself, because the action is able to tell me where is it, and this way I can just copy the configuration and run it. Now I have still a problem that I need to unpause the image, so I have to do twice. So now you will see that I invoke twice. Okay, now I am going to invoke the action. First I start the debugger, and then now I am invoking the action. The first time it does not hit it, I guess because it's paused. The second time it will start the debugger. Okay, now you see that is under debug because I connected and I can move around and go step by step. So the action can be completely edited, deployed, and debugged, all from an editor that is everything in Docker. This one is actually work in progress because I'm trying to improve. I'm trying to improve because, as you can see, the next step is to automate completely all the steps. So I already have a proof of concept working. I'm debugging. I was hoping to have ready by today. Is not. So next time I hope to demonstrate the thing working. But the idea is that I don't have to do the step that I did so far. That I have to copy the configuration back. Do everything automated. So I initialize with the debugger, I ask to the action his IP, the IP will create a tunnel, and then I can run on the debugger. A single command, I just start the debugger. This is the idea. Now, of course, you can ask, why are you doing this and not using OpenWhisk debug? Well, actually, it's still open the idea that I can use this, because if I can just put whisk debug, add in the TIA image, and use it. Unfortunately, it does not work. At least I tried, and from what I see, whisk debug uses uses Docker, so it manipulates in some way Docker image and having TIA running on Docker image, and it does not work well with whisk debug. And probably it's possible, but I need help from them to make it work if it's possible. And also another important thing is that whisk debug is written in Node. Now I want to integrate with the whisk command line, so I had to re-implement the logic to enable the debugger in whisk. Also, it's important that I want to minimize dependencies. So all you need to have is the whisk command line and Docker, nothing else. Because to use whisk debug, you need to have, it works externally, but you need to have the Java development kit. You have to Node, Docker, it must be the right version. So it's a bit heavy on dependencies. So the basic reason because I'm doing this setup is because it looks simpler to me and more manageable. But of course, I am open for discussion. So if we can merge the efforts, I'm more than happy. Also, I've been asked, can we use this setup in production environment? Well, in theory, yes, but there are two requirements. First requirements is either or we have to add some forwarding in the controller to reach the image, because the whisk debugger will open a socket that will reach the debugger. So probably we might need to add a service that will do the port forwarding to reach the debugger port. I don't know if this is possible because it can have security problems. Another possibility is for Kubernetes-based OpenWhisk deployment that we can actually run TIA within Kubernetes and expose it as a service. So it can be another the services for OpenWhisk. And probably this is the best option. So people can actually ask to the controller with a new editor, it will launch a container with TIA, and then they can access that to an HTTP and to an ingress controller, and then debug the actions inside. But this is for the future. This is as me asked, so this is my answer. Okay, that's it. You there?
Michele, is there any reason that you didn't start with the actual IDE, such as VS Code?
Say it again, sorry?
I mean, is there any reason that you didn't start with the actual IDE, such as VS Code or IntelliJ and so on?
The problem is exactly this, because I am doing this to help. The idea started because I'm helping a team in Italy to build a complete development environment for development. And my requirement is to provide a complete development environment for them. So I am doing this basically to provide a complete IDE more than provide a debugger. It could work, of course, if you use different environment, but this setup is specifically designed to be a complete integrated environment that I want to integrate with the standalone OpenWhisk. So there's some reason because you cannot do this with the IntelliJ or other stuff. The problem is we should put IntelliJ in a Docker container to reach the image. So for many reasons, I see this thing like strictly bound to using TIA for now. Probably it's possible, but it would, unless you expose to the external the port for the debugger, yeah, you can do it. But at the moment, I have a problem to reach the port of the debugger, so I'm mostly thinking to have this inside the cluster, either the standalone or inside the Kubernetes deployment. Not sure if I was clear.
So you are considering the scenario that each user runs their own SAIA in their browser, right?
Yeah,
okay.
That's
the hosted service, hosted SAIA.
Yeah, that's the idea. Mostly on local development, actually, because the idea was to be able to develop locally and then deploy in production. But if we have to do in a production, we will have to provide to each user his own TIA in a container in Kubernetes.
So does that mean that you can't actually use your own IDE? I mean, could you make it work so that somebody who does want to use IntelliJ or Eclipse running locally can connect to the debug port and do the debugging?
It is possible, again, but I have to expose the port. And they have to set up locally, because normally the problem is to set up, because you have to pass a lot of parameters, you have to configure, you have, this is normally is complex enough that can be a good obstacle for certain people. But in principle, it's perfectly possible, as long as you can expose the port.
Right. I think for local development, that's certainly doable. For a production setting, I think this is where you need to get into the proxy and why things like the Adobe debugger work the way that they do, or the previous OpenWhisk debugger, because they have to address that issue in production where you just don't have access to the port, can't connect directly as a server. I think it'd be interesting. I mean, I think this is an interesting model where you need nothing, as you said, you get an IDE as a service. I think I don't know how common that is versus I'm already using my IDE and I just want to connect from that, and I already have the code. I want to connect from that to the standalone debugger to debug. How do you make that easy? It's a different problem, I admit, but could also have more benefits as well.
The idea is that you should be able to have an up and running development environment for OpenWhisk, just downloading the command line interface Whisk and nothing else. You have Whisk, you type Whisk IDE, and it will download everything needed to start developing locally. When you have done, you can deploy in production from nothing else. This is the idea. So I built this. Of course, if you have a more complex setup, you can use, but normally having an immediate IDE is a huge advantage of the model of OpenWhisk, because the idea is that you just have to write a function. Here it's more, it's even easier. You just in the command that you can have the IDE, you can make it go in production in minutes. So this is the idea. Anyway.
Okay, thank you for a great demonstration.
Okay.
I think, yeah, I can share our versions at Neighbor as well. So let me share my screen.
Should I give you back the? One second. I want to share the. Stop sharing. Oops. I need to stop sharing. Okay. Good.
Okay. Okay, let me show you a demo first. So this is our portal for internal platforms, and we have many categories such as compute, monitoring, database, and so on. And I make them blur because of the security reason. And this Lambda is, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so this Lambda is the name of our serverless platform, which is based on OpenWhisk. Then I can connect to my namespace, and I can create a new action. Hello world. So I can change the code and default parameter, and I can invoke this action. And I can also set some breakpoints like this, and I can start debugging like this. And then I can see the parameters like this, and surely I can override the existing parameter like as well. So this is the debugging features at neighbor. So let me
very cool. Just a quick question: Does that you're using, I guess, the built-in Chrome debugger? Is that specific to Node, or can you do this for other languages, or do you only support Node?
Yeah, currently it only supports Node, but we have a plan to support many other runtimes as well. So let me share how it works. So it is based on this Chrome DevTools protocol. And as you know, it already has some protocol for debugger. So you can set some breakpoint like this, and it defines many protocols for debugging. And we have a debug proxy. So it manages the debug session, and it correlates the sessions and actual containers. And we also have a bridge. It is a representative for each runtime containers, and its interface is exposed to public. So at first time, our UI will ask for a new session ID. Then this debug proxy will issue a new debug session ID, and it can invoke an action along with this session ID. And then at the invoker layer, this invoker can create a debugging container with the debug port opened. And after that, it will let bridge know the session ID and the actual IP address of container. Then this bridge connect to the debug proxy and let it know the session ID and the IP address of this invoker machine. And at this point, it is ready to start debugging. So this debug proxy let UI know the session ID and it is ready now. Then this UI will open the Chrome DevTools UI, and finally it will communicate with the actual container via this debug proxy and bridge. So they are just forward packets in between the actual containers and Chrome DevTools UI. And I think while Michele is working on that debugger, he may also need some components like this debug proxy. We also have a plan to extend this debug proxy to support multiple protocols for VS Code, IntelliJ, and other runtimes. So I think if Michele has defined some components like this, as if this is an actual container, but it will just forward the packets to the container, then I think we can align our debugger with his works as well.
This is great. How will you support other languages? Because like with Node, you've got the built-in debugger already. What's your thought on how you would actually debug, say, a Python program?
Yeah, so actually we can debug remotely with VS Code, right? That means VS Code already has some protocols to debug remotely. So if our debug proxy support that protocol, then not UI, maybe ID can directly connect to our debug proxy. Then this debug proxy transparently forward that packets to actual container.
Right. Okay. So you would attach to the developer's IDE directly. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yes. And actually, currently in our version, this is a actual OpenWhisk deployment. So we run some debugging invokers in isolated area, but I think in Nicholas' work, you can run debugging container locally. If he has any debug proxy, then maybe local ID can connect to debug proxy as if this is a runtime container, and this debug proxy can forward the packet to the local debugging containers as well.
So how do you direct? I see. So when you invoke something in debug mode, then you route it to a different set of invokers.
Yes.
And you do that by using a different route, or you're dispatching from the controller? How are you doing that distribution?
Actually, I can show you later, but we have a new component. The name is scheduler. So we can, we labeled invokers with different tags, and we can schedule actions based on the tags.
Gotcha.
So in case of a debugging action, we can send to the debugging invokers.
Very cool.
So any other questions or comments? Okay. Then I think I can move to the next one. I want to show you our pinpoint integration. Actually, pinpoint is an APM tool, and we can trace the transactions using bytecode instrumentation. So let me show you the demo as well. So if I invoke this action, then this pinpoint button is enabled. So if I click this, then we can move to the pinpoint transaction view, and we can see something like this. So this is our portal, and this is our UI, and this is our OpenWhisk controller and invoker, and this is our own component, the scheduler. And we can see the transactions and how much time did it take at each step. So you can see here, this is our portal and this is UI. Yeah, this one is actual OpenWhisk. So I invoke this action, and yeah, and the activation ID of this action invocation is this one. It calls the initialization API to this container with this container address, and finally it invokes the action with some arguments like this. So we can see the time taken and the gap between each step, and we can also trace an asynchronous call as well, like this. So
that's interesting. So you've got pinpoint integrated with the control plane and data plane, right? Because you're exposing sort of all the internal traffic.
Yeah, actually, it is the request sampled, and yes, I think it's control plane. Yeah. And the best thing is, because it used the bytecode instrumentation, we don't need any code changes to use this feature. And we recently contributed the plugins, Apache HTTP and OpenWhisk. So I think anyone can take advantage of this pinpoint because it is open source.
Yep.
And
that's awesome.
we are waiting for the new release of pinpoint to share how to use it with OpenWhisk.
So pinpoint, that UI that you showed, is that coming from pinpoint, or is that a visualization that you built?
Pinpoint has its own UI actually. So we just linked this UI from our Lambda UI.
Got it.
So actually, this is from Pinpoint. And next one is I want to suggest the official procedures for new proposals. So the purpose is to define a standard way to include a new, possibly big change. And we need to manage the life cycle of proposals rather than letting them die in the wiki. And we need to enhance the communication and discoverability of proposals, and we need to form a consensus for each proposal via a well-practiced artifact. So I want to suggest to have a dedicated repo for proposals, just like what Kubernetes project does. And maybe we can define these procedures using the first proposal. And this is also similar to the KEP one from the Kubernetes project. So I reviewed KEP from Kubernetes project and KIP from the Kafka project, and Cordoba discussed as Bertrand suggested, and this is what I'm suggesting. So if anyone wants to include a major new feature, subsystem, or piece of functionality, and any breaking changes, then he is supposed to open a proposal. And the proposal should include motivation and proposed changes and compatibility issues if there is, and integration plan, and so on. And proposal has 4 states: a draft, and in progress, complete, and abandoned. And the procedures are as follows. So the proposal owner can create an issue to propose a new change. Then it becomes the draft stage. And he can discuss the proposal and form a consensus via any channels, such as mailing list, Slack, or issues. And once members form a consensus for the proposal, then the proposal owner can create a pull request to file the proposal into the repo. And once a proposal is filed, then the proposal becomes the in-progress state, and the development is started. And once implementation is done and it is included in the master branch, then it becomes the completed state. And finally, if it is not being maintained anymore, then it becomes the abandoned state. So what we need to discuss is this one. So we need to define the name, and we need to confirm to create a new repo, and we need to confirm to whether we will open the first proposal to define the procedures, and finally, how to decide to adopt the proposals. I think last time Roderick suggested this name, point. Any other suggestions?
Yeah, so thanks, Dominic, for putting this together. I think we do need something like this. If you're talking about bringing in, somebody pinpoint capabilities, or between you, Michele, and Adobe, talking about somebody Adobe, some of the debugger integration, I think it'd be nice to sort of have a unified story of how we're integrating these with the platform. My personal reasons for also wanting this is I want to talk about some work we've done with enabling OpenWhisk to run with isolates and open sourcing some of the proof of concepts that we've done. And I think that's at least 3 major threads of work that at least has some people interested in doing them. I think we don't need an overly onerous process, so I think we should still make it lightweight, as Bertrand said. we have a small community, and making it too bureaucratic or too procedural will just increase the work that we're doing amongst ourselves. But having a formal process that we're following that says, here's 3 or 4 steps like you had outlined on the previous, I think is a good idea. I'm okay with your proposal as is, essentially. I think the consensus should be, is there somebody committed to implementing and following through on the proposal and carrying it out? I think what we've seen is there's proposals, there's ideas, and then for various reasons that sort of just dies out, and then it's not clear that anything has happened. So I think the bar is there's consensus this is a good idea, and somebody is committed to actually working on it, whether it's the person proposing it, people from their team, or they're able to rally support from others in the community to help. But I think having these will be helpful. I've had several Slack conversations on our OpenWhisk channel in recent months where people said, what can I do? What can I help with? I know Rust or I know Go. Is there anything I could do? And it's been hard sort of, because we have so many things across so many repos to sort of bring it all together and say, okay, here's something you can do for somebody just coming in. Whereas these proposals, I think, would be a better way of consolidating something that's meaningful for others to get excited about and actually do. So I'm in support of doing something like this. I think my only concern is making sure we don't introduce too much bureaucracy, given that our community is not the size of Kubernetes or even Kafka. Yeah, so that's my viewpoint on it.
Okay, thank you for the comments. So if we decide to create a new repo, then I can ask to Apache infrastructure team for a new repo.
So I guess I do have one more thing I guess I'd want to add. I wouldn't put this in another repo. I think we have too many repos as it is, and it already makes it hard for some people to discover information. I would either reuse the main OpenWhisk repo, or find another repo like the release repo or something to host this, as opposed to creating another repo. My preference would be we have on the OpenWhisk repo itself, we organize the discussions and the proposals are all documented there, because that's our primary face of the world is still that repo. I think we're seeing others use the dev tools because they're using the quick start, and that's how they get there. And we're seeing Kubernetes because their people are interested in the Kubernetes deployment. The rest of the repos are just maintenance overhead for us, and there's reasons for doing that. But I think there's only 2 or 3 repos that most people eventually land on. And my preference would be not a new repo, do it in an OpenWhisk repo. And that's where most eyeballs are. And that's the reason for doing it.
Then I think it is also related to the last topic. This is about the documentation, and I suggested to have a separate repo for documentation because we need a full build of PR only to include the documentation. So if we use our core repo for proposal, then the one need a full build of PR to file his proposal into the repo.
That's true.
A big overhead.
I mean, we have a website repo. Is there a reason not to put the documentation there?
Yeah, that's.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Sorry, I had to cough. Yeah, I think the website repo could be another natural place, because that could also go to our website potentially, or we could publish it as part of our website and also increase eyeballs. I think that's a good suggestion too, Dave.
Right. Yeah, and then the PR time for that is a couple of minutes. It's not very onerous.
Yeah, I think that would be great. How about this proposal?
I think I agree with Roderick that until we have a large volume of these proposals, putting them in the main repo is probably the right thing to do. And if we get a lot of these, we could put them somewhere else. But I don't anticipate that, to be honest.
Okay. So do you guys agree with these procedures, but just leveraging the existing core repo, right? Or have any other opinion about these procedures?
I think this is fine. I mean, given that you say start with an issue, then we can have labels to label the different stages that things are in.
So rather than filing the proposal, we can just have some labels and manage them, manage the life cycle of the proposal and so on.
I think that's a good way to start. I think the most important thing is just having the process and documenting the process in place. Then you can, somebody comes at it, you say, here's a procedure, follow it, and we can see how it works. I think there's, as soon as this procedure is in place, then I'm happy to sort of submit one of the first proposals around the edge work that we'd like to contribute. Sounds like you have some things you want to do. Maybe there's something on the debug front related to how do we proxy or how do we schedule things for debugging, because those require different resources. So, and we're the stakeholders at this point. We're the ones pushing for this and making sure that we can go from, we have a conception, something we want to contribute, let's have a formal way of doing it and reaching an actual contribution as opposed to just talking about it. So my recommendation would be document the procedure as you have it there, and then let's just try it with at least the 2 or 3 things we just talked about.
Okay, sounds great.
I do think if you call it poem, though, that the procedure should require that you submit a haiku or some form of a poem.
Oh, sorry, I didn't get it.
It's okay. I was
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try. Okay, and the last one is this one. And the main reason I want to suggest this is I want to avoid that full build of PR2 only to include the new documentation. Maybe I can, as you suggested, we can take advantage of that website repo. And yeah, I just want to demonstrate our documentation site as well. But do you want to show that? See that?
Sure. So this is an internal site you use for
Yes.
generating documents. Okay.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, this is our documentation repo, and it is being served by pages. And this website is generated by Hugo, which is static site generator. And basically, this documentation is searchable like this. And Hugo has many themes, so we can take advantage of it like this. So in our case, we are using this long theme. And surely we can customize this theme and we can have our own theme as well. And what I want to show you is having the process for CI/CD of documentation. So I will try to add a new document under this directory. So I can create a new document under this hello world to use directory, and actually it is markdown friendly syntax. So it only has some metadata for Hugo. So I can use any markdown syntax like this. And in the local development, I can use sugar salt, and I can connect this site in my local. Then I can see this hello world page, and this page actually dynamically change like this. So it's easier to write down a document. And if I finish writing the document, then I can push this to my repo.
So I think we could probably integrate something like this. Actually, it'd be nice to have. I don't know if Apache Infra will allow us to do this, but we could integrate with something like Netlify to preview a site as well as part of an automatic build, even though that doesn't do the actual publishing. We can just set up an alternate place just for previewing websites, which could be nice in terms of looking at how your documentation works. And then I know Hugo works with Netlify.
Yeah, and it's easier to review the documentation as well, because
right, because you see it in its actual form. Exactly.
Yeah. So this is a PR builder, and it builds this pull request. So this is the built pull request, and you can see the actual view of this PR.
Right.
So I want to suggest you this CI/CD pipeline.
I think we might be limited in some things in terms of what Apache will and will not allow us to do. I think because it depends on the permissions. For example, an external process will request, if it's write access, forget it, they won't grant it. But if it's read-only access, I think they will allow it. And then that would mean that we could integrate something like this and make it a little bit faster and better to preview changes before they're published.
You are saying in terms of the Hugo, right? Rather than just pipeline.
I'm saying if you're interested in doing this, you should. I see no reason not to. I don't know what others think. But I'm just raising a point that some of the features you just showed with automatic preview links, etc., we may be limited by what Apache Infra allows us to do.
Yes, maybe I think we can use the Jenkins playground, because we are also using Jenkins to having this kind of pipeline.
Sure, that's a good point.
Yeah, and I have access to the Jenkins as well, so maybe I can try with the website repo. Okay, sounds good. So that's it. Is there any other topic to discuss or bring up?
So I want to mention, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I wanted to ask about the Java 11 pull requests. Do we, I guess, never mind. I'll just take that to the dev list. Go ahead, Matt.
Just want to let people know that we finished updating our Tecton pipeline to use what's called workspaces. So we can actually support concurrent branches when we do Tecton builds through what they consider a directional approach. So we'll be having some articles on that soon. And Will from our team has finished. He'll have a pull request soon in the next day or two under the Docker runtime that will enable that for the pipeline, the Tecton pipeline, to allow us to build either for OpenWhisk or for Knative. And that will bring along the Python and Swift runtimes. So they can be run on build or run on OpenWhisk or Knative.
So sorry, so that last point, is that you using the action loop or using the Python proxy in the?
Well, the the Swift and Python runtimes use the Docker runtime as the base image for their proxy. It's a Python proxy.
Okay, I think we have both variants. I think.
Yeah, I thought, we talked to Michele earlier about updating his proxy, the Go proxy. We'd love to do that. So we just basically stayed away because we thought he was going to be doing that work.
Okay.
But if the gates are open, I'm happy to have my guy Will work on the Go proxy as well.
I think there's been, Michele, you haven't talked about this, but there's some PRs that Michele is preparing that improves a number of things with the Go proxy that we found about how it handles initialization, and so I think there's a number of improvements probably worth updating on the next community call about some of that work.
Yeah, I'll come to the next community call and present the Tecton stuff.
Are we done?
Okay, Michele, are you saying something?
I was muted. No, I was saying that in the code there is also Alessio that wrote some code to implement the missing part of the knative port for action loop. So we progressed on that. I helped him actually because he offered us a volunteer, and I helped him, and we reached the point where we can handle the requests, and actually, so it's possible. We have not merged that thing because we are not yet written any test, but except the manual test. But there is already some code to work on. It's just a matter of priority, but we can also. There is also a significant part of the work already done. We are stuck in translating all the tests that are needed because we are written in JavaScript, and we are not sure how to test that thing in the same way as the Node.js has to be tested. So probably this is something I want to discuss better to also complete the knative port of action loop. That has been a sort of left suspended, but we have worked also on that. Just for you to know. That's it. I finished.
Oh, and one last thing. So in case there's a couple of PRs that went in over the last couple of weeks for Whisk Deploy. So now we support secure keys. We didn't support secure keys before. So in case anybody's using that or wants to use that feature commercially, that should work now through the Go client.
Oh, thank you for the sharing. I missed them. All right, so let's wrap up. Okay, thank you guys for attending the meeting, and we need to